Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Canal Days. As always, I am your host Carrie, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Comel. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast collection of historical sites throughout Massachusetts, with Robert's expertise of the local history as our personal guide. Each episode we uncover histories throughout local communities, highlighting the historical landmarks and uncovering their seminal significance. Today's episode of Canal Days will be talking about the Fort Warren, located in Boston, Massachusetts. So, clarify where Fort Warren is located and what year it was built.
It's located on an island that belongs to Boston, Massachusetts, and it used to be a fort at one time for sure. It was very important during the Civil War because it turned into a prison, and it lasted in a job as a fort through World War One, and then through World War Two, where they were looking out for submarines. So it's been around a very long time, and it was made exactly for that reason. It's on George's Island in Boston Harbor, and they started it early on in 1834, and it was ready by the Civil War to be used. So today we're going to talk about a lot of features of it, including who designed the fort, what the fort was used through the years, what the fort is used for now, why was a memorial put up in 1963, and then who are the 13 men that died in that camp, and what does the rest of the memorial state, what reason was given to be taken down, and why should the memorial be put back up. So there's a lot to talk about, and I visited this place when I was 22 years old, so I experienced it up close. You have to take the ferry to get out there, and then you can walk around for hours and hours and experience it very nicely. And it still belongs to Boston.
And reveal who was the architect that designed the fort.
Lieutenant Colonel Sylvanus Thayer, who lived from 1785 to 1872. He designed a lot of military installations around the United States, and for that reason, he's very well known, especially fortresses. And he did a good job. This one's made in the form of a five-pointed star that is not perfectly shaped for a good reason. I mean, you can use a star shape, but it's a military installation, so it needs to change its shape in a couple places. And it's a great location for old-time observations of enemy ships coming anywhere near Boston. And Boston Harbor, of course, has, on a clear day, maybe 100-mile sight line in all directions, north, northeast, east, south, east, and then south. So it was a great place for as long as it was useful.
And narrate what the fort was used for.
All right, it was used as a lookout location, and if needed, it turned into a battle station. During the Civil War, though, it was used as a prisoner of war camp for the Confederate forces that were captured, and they would have been brought back to New England, especially to Boston, Massachusetts. And you had a few thousand prisoners of war here. At any given time, you had several hundred, and of course they were released as they went through the war. And then it was used during World War I as a lookout for ships from Europe that might have been on a malevolent destination towards New England. And this is one of many forts protecting the eastern coast of the United States during that war. During World War II, they were on the lookout for U-boats. Germany would have these submarines that would come in very close to the shoreline of New England, and they would look out for these places. And during the daytime, they would look for a certain motion in the water. At night, they had to shut down all their lights and just look for, actually check the sounds and see if anything was audible. So it was heavily used, but not nowadays.
And distinguish what the fort is used for currently.
It's been changed over since the early 1950s, into a historical site. And so you can go out there and visit a fort, which is always a treat. And this one was a special one in the history of New England. And they let you go around the outside. I'm not sure they still let you go in. I was able to go to a few parts of it, but that was the 1980s. And it doesn't cost much to go on a ferry, and I think the visit itself is free. So it's a fine place to go visit on a day trip. And you get a good sense of what the lookout would have been towards the rest of Boston Harbor. Boston's changed a lot since those days, that's for sure. But the Atlantic Ocean is still the same. So it's a nice trip.
And depict the reason the memorial was built in 1963.
It was built by the Daughters of the Confederates, the Boston chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which is a female group that looks after Civil War veterans that were on the Confederate side. And these men that were in prisoner of war camp were Confederate soldiers and Navy personnel, and sometimes citizens. And they look after them, and they put up a monument to these 13 men. And it was a nice monument. It had all the 13 names of the people on there. And that's all that died. So thousands of people passed through as prisoners of war, but it was so well kept that only 13 men died, probably of illnesses. And that's an incredible record. Compare that to the Andersonville prison in Andersonville, Georgia, where thousands of Northern forces died of illnesses like diphtheria and cholera. And it's quite a difference. And of course, all the Northern soldiers who died down there are honored with gravestones.
And stick around, and we will be right back after this short announcement. Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path throughout the state of Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, founded by Robert Kumo. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families or groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit holyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com to book your private tour today. So getting back to our podcast on the Fort Warren in Boston, Massachusetts, disclose who the 13 men that died in the camp.
There was D.B. Cartwright, who died in 1861. He was from North Carolina and a private. There was James Cooper. He died in 1861. 6 days later, he was from North Carolina, and he was a private. There was Thomas Jefferson Davidson, who died in 1862, from Mississippi, and he was a colonel. There was A. Diggs, who died in 1865. He was a citizen from Virginia. He wasn't in the military. I wish I could find out someday what he was doing. Was he a spy? Was he a person that was like a helper, a citizen helper for the military, you know, with supplies, so forth? Very hard to say. There's Aquila Glasscock, from 1865. He was a private in Mosby's 43rd Battalion of Virginia. There was F.A. Gumby, who died in 1864. He was a mate on the steamer Nita, and that was from Maryland. There was John Hogan, who died in 1864. He was a coal heaver on the steamer Florida, so he too was a citizen. There was Edward John Kent Johnston, who died in 1862. He was a first assistant engineer coming out of Atlanta, Georgia. There was James Kinsey, who died in 1861. He was in the North Carolina's regiment as a lieutenant. There's Samuel Lanier, who died in 1862. He was in the North Carolina regiment as a private. There was H.C. Rogerson, who died in 1862. He was in the 17th Division of North Carolina as a private. There was Reed Sanders, who was buried in New York City, and he died in 1864. He was a major, and he was in charge of the commissary. And then there was George Sawyer, died in 1861. He was from North Carolina, and he was a private, and he was the first one to die of all these men. 4 of them died in November of 1861. So I guess the worst time to be there was the first year in that month. Maybe there was a disease that spread around.
And indicate what the description states on the memorial.
During the war between the states, 1861 to 1865, more than 1,000 Confederates were imprisoned here, of whom 13 died. This marker placed in their memory by the Boston chapter, United Daughters of the Confederacy, at Civil War Centennial Ceremony, May 24th, 1963. Beautiful statement, and that's found both above and then below the listing of the 13 men.
And unveil the reason that was given to remove the memorial.
It was during the time where a lot of statues and memorials were being taken down 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, in the year 2017. It was an offshoot of President Trump taking office, where a lot of people were trying to redefine the United States, and they were taking down statues of Thomas Jefferson and Robert E. Lee, taking down memorials in the North and in the South, and they weren't very discriminate upon what they were doing, and there was not enough opposition to them, and so a lot of these memorials, plaques, statues, so forth were taken down. Some went into storage, but some were very, very severely damaged. So, sad to say this had to happen.
And declare why the memorial should be placed back in its former spot.
Okay, I'll get into that. I can give you a statement here. The memorial honors the 13 individuals that lost their lives at the prison. It also has a nice statement about the gravestone, which I told you about. The conditions were so humane that even though thousands of prisoners would pass through its gates, only 13 died. Contrast this to Andersonville. Short-sighted progressive politicians took down the memorial in 2017 and is now in storage at the Massachusetts Archives. This was during the 2017 rampage on Southern statues, memorials, and monuments, which included some of the Northern items. And sure as some of those statues, memorials, and monuments in Southern states were put up out of spite and should be or have been taken down. This monument was not put up out of spite. The North of the 1860s was vastly more respectful of the South than Massachusetts of the present day can be. There are hundreds of Southern military men that are buried around the state with nicely made gravestones and military decorations. Hopefully these will not be found and removed. The North post-bellum was very conciliatory to the South. Much was done to repair the geographic regions. Many statues, memorials, monuments went up very quickly in this period to honor the war deaths. Also to honor the people that tried to heal the Union. Many cemeteries and town commons have such monuments. Just because the men who died at the fort here were on the Confederate side does not mean they should not be respected. They were respected during their stay at the prison camp and should be respected again. At first, the men were buried on the west side. They were moved to the post cemetery at Fort Winthrop in Winthrop, Massachusetts. Most of the men were then moved once again and had a third burial in the Deer Island Cemetery in Winthrop, Massachusetts. Their last move came in 1939 when they were moved to Fort Devens Post Cemetery in Devens, Massachusetts. 10 of 13 men are without gravestone at their final resting place. It is typical that a set group that are or once were buried as a group would have a monument within a cemetery devoted to them. Thus, the memorial stone should either be returned to Fort Warren or brought to the cemetery at Fort Winthrop or to the cemetery at Fort Devens. This would be the respectable act. It would also help both young and old learn about history. Until that act happens, let this page stand as a memorial and a monument to those men. Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Canals Days and our episode on the Fort Warren in Boston, Massachusetts, and joining us on our journey through the Connecticut River Valley and its rich history. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden and overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped the past in the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Camus, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at hoyokecanaltour.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in to our next episode of Canal Days. Until next time.